Hello and welcome. Thanks so much for joining me today for Kineo Office Hours. Today what we're going to be talking about is roles and permissions in blocks. So you may be familiar with roles, you may be familiar with permissions, but you may not have ever seen them used specifically down within blocks. So let's take a quick peek. Oh yeah, for those who don't know me, my name is Taylor Craig and I'm the Senior Platforms Consultant here at Kineo. All right, so let's talk a little bit about roles. And this kind of give you an idea of how roles function. So there's multiple different roles in the system. You know, you've got your site administrator, you've got a course creator, editing trainer, non-editing trainer, and then learner, typically. Those are going to be your main roles. You also have a staff manager role. So those roles can actually be assigned in multiple different contexts. So a lot of times when we're training or when we're showing you the system, you may hear us refer to system context. So that's going to be at the highest level in the system, and every time you assign a role at a certain context, it is inherited in all of the contexts below. So then you've got a category context, course context, activity, resource, or block context, and then you even have actually user context. So the user context is going to be where your staff manager is typically assigned. Typically always where that's going to be assigned. But just to kind of give you a refresher of those roles and where they're assigned and the context that they can be assigned in. So to kind of refresh your brain on what permissions are, if you go to, I believe it's site administration, users, accounts, permissions, then you can go into each individual role and you can manipulate lots and lots of different permissions. So you can manipulate those permissions on a role basis so that you can allow that role to do exactly what you want that role to be able to do. So that's one of the powerful tools of Totara, is that you do have that ability to kind of finagle it to work how you want it to work based on all of those different permissions. Now to take this a step further, we're going to talk about how you can do that inside of blocks as well, utilizing a combination of both roles and permissions. So let me pull this across. You'll notice up here at the top, I want to point out that I am not logged in. So basically I have my front page available to non-authenticated users. A lot of times it's technically the quote guest role, but an authenticated user is someone who just has access to the system. They are maybe not enrolled in anything, but they have access to your site. So right now I'm not logged in, but we're going to go ahead. I'm going to log in as Taylor Test. Before I log in, I want to point out something. So I see block 1 and I see block 2, and I see a login block. That's what I see. When I click login, that login block goes away, and you'll notice that I see a third block now. So that block is now appearing. If I look at this from an administrator's viewpoint, with editing turned on, you'll notice that the admin always sees this block 3, once they're logged in, of course. But the admin also in edit view sees the login block. So the login block, it is just core supposed to work that way. It's always going to show up before you log in. It's going to always disappear after you log in. That's just kind of logical logic for that particular block. But for block number 3, I did something extra to it to allow it to show up only after logging in. It's a good way, as you can see, to kind of even out that screen across the top once that login block does go away. So it's a nice way to even that screen out. So you may also have some things that you may want to appear to people before they log in versus after they log in. It may not be relevant to them once they're actually logged in. You may be advertising something before you log in, things like that. So how did I do that? So underneath actions, typically we're going in here and we're going to configure that block. But what I did is I actually came in here and I went to permissions. This is often overlooked, and a lot of times people don't even realize it's there. I'm going to click on permissions. So what you'll notice that I did, authenticated user is going to be the most important role that is available here. Now you'll notice these are permissions, the capabilities per se. Add a new awesome block, edit block settings, or view the block. The main permission we're looking at and the one we really care about is the view block. And typically that's going to be the permission you're looking for on any of these blocks if you're using this particular little trick that I'm showing you today. Authenticated user is important. On the front page, everyone is an authenticated user because you're not technically enrolled in that front page. We can leave learner, trainer, editing, trainer. Those roles really don't matter on this particular screen. You'll see here in a minute down on a course, it does matter which roles you have in there. But you'll notice here that on the prohibited side, I've added the role of guest. So that is how that worked. Now, and typically what you would see is you would see guest over here in green. You would see it on the view block, which would make it appear prior to login, so before you logged in. So this is just, it's really an easy trick. It's just something you don't think about utilizing. Now let's take a look at another option. So let me come back in here, pull this back over. So this user is actually an editing trainer in a course, and I wanted to make a block available to her that I don't want my learners to see in the course. Now, probably several of you by now are familiar with the audience-based HTML block. That's an additional block that we can add on, and basically we can make blocks visible based on audience. If you don't have that block and you're just really wanting to make something available to maybe an instructor or someone who's in your course that needs to see maybe a few additional things, but nobody else needs to see it, you can also kind of do it based on roles, but it takes a little more manipulation to do it. So in here, we see this block. I've named it Instructor Resources, and I've just kind of given them access to things that may be important to the person who's actually facilitating the course. Now, if I look at that same course as a learner, I'm going to do a split screen here. And let me log in as learner over here. I thought I was already in. And I'm going to go to that same course. You'll notice that my learner just sees search forums. It's like this block's not even there. So it doesn't create any kind of weird white space. It doesn't do anything odd on the page, but it just jumps everything up because I'm not supposed to see this block as a learner. So you'll notice I'm in the same exact course, ID 41. So you know I'm not pulling a trick on you, ID 41. Okay, so there we have that. Now let's take a look at what that looks like. I believe I can do it as this editing trainer, so I don't have to do it as an admin. So again, we're not going to configure, we're going to go to the permissions option. So here we have authenticated user is somebody who can see it. We have trainer and we have editing trainer. And then for prohibited, we've prohibited guests as well as learners. So you may wonder, you've been saying this whole time that everybody's an authenticated user. Yes, you are, but if you hold another role, like a trainer role or an editing trainer role, that's going to be kind of your initial, the one that it looks at first in a course. So if you're in there in a course and you're a trainer, that's the role it's going to look at first. But we do still have to have authenticated user, because I'm still an authenticated user. That's still who I am. So a learner, they are an authenticated user, but we're prohibiting the one that it's actually looking at inside of the course. So it's actually looking at the learner role, so we're prohibiting that role from being able to see it. So that's how we're able to do that, making things available to people who are facilitators who don't need to see it if you're a learner. Now you say, okay, I don't use editing trainer. I don't use some of those core Totara roles. So that's okay. If you don't use those core Totara roles and you still want to kind of have the ability to do this, what you need to do is in, let's go back out to the admin homepage. Underneath administration, site administration, users, permissions, define roles. You may want to create another role just called like facilitator block role, whatever you want to do there. So you can add a new role. It doesn't have to have any permissions per se. It really doesn't. So I'm going to say I'm not going to use any kind of archetype. I'm just going to say it's a no role. I'm actually not going to add any permissions to the role, but I'm going to determine where it can be seen. So block is where I want it to be seen. These are the contexts. So again, kind of back to that PowerPoint slide with the pyramid, upside down pyramid. These are those different contexts. So here's that block level. I really don't need anything else. You may want to come in here and put view block, but you've got those permissions in the block, so you technically should not need that. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to create the role. Now let's go back and look at, whoops, helps if you name it. Call it the block trick role. Fixing all this to be one word. Short names on top, and that always throws me. Okay, so let's go back. You know what? You may actually, you're going to want to assign the role somewhere. So you may want to assign that role at the system level, probably. So anybody who you want to be a facilitator to be able to use this, I would probably assign them at the system level. That way they can do this all the way throughout the site, and you don't have to do it on a course-by-course basis. But if you wanted to, you could also do course, and then you can just assign it at the course level. But you're going to need at least somewhere where you can assign that role. So let's go take a look in that course, because I want to show you inside the block what happens. So, but see here, you can also assign roles in instructor resources block. So you can also do that, and notice how block trick role shows up here. So I can then choose a person on my site to be able to see it there. So that's one way that you could do that. But then also you're likely going to want to do the permissions as well. So let me go back out one more step. And we're going to go to permissions. And I should be seeing it here, and I'm not. Let's do block trick role. Here's another option you can do, advanced role override. We do see it here. So we're going to change it to view block. We're going to say allow. And now it should appear there. There it is. Okay, so if you don't see it showing up there, try here, and then make sure to add that role to the permission that you need to add that to. So this is just kind of a neat additional thing that's available that I don't think a lot of people are aware of. When back in the day when I used to just use Moodle and not Totara, did this all the time to allow for different visibilities. So it's a Moodle feature that's there and that's been there for a long time, but nobody's just super aware of it anymore, it seems like. So thank you very much for joining me today. I hope you found it helpful, and I'm going to turn the floor over to you for questions.